Hi everybody, welcome to our Myth of the Month. Today we're going to be looking at some urban legends. Urban legends are stories passed from person to person that are claimed to be true. Many are based on real people, places, or events, but are usually exaggerated so that they may no longer be completely true. Because they are often handed down by word of mouth, details can be changed around, so some urban legends may have variations depending on where you heard them or who told them to you. Today we'll be sharing a few urban legends from around the United States. How many do you believe? Our first story is the Dead Children's Playground from Alabama. Maple Hill Cemetery in Huntsville was founded in 1822. It is the oldest and largest cemetery in Alabama. Deep within the cemetery is a children's playground, complete with swings, slides, and other fun things you would usually find on an average playground. This area is officially called Drost Park, but it is better known as Dead Children's Playground. In the 1960s, many children went missing. Their bodies were later found in near what is now the playground. The spirits of these children and those of other children buried in the cemetery come out at night and have the time of their afterlives on the playground. The ghosts usually come out between 10 o'clock at night and 3 o'clock in the morning. Strange things happen between these hours. The swings will continuously move back and forth in unison, even on still nights. You can hear the disembodied laughter and voices of children. You may see flashes of ghostly light, and if you take a picture, ghostly figures may appear in your photo. In 2007, the cemetery wanted to expand and took out the playground equipment. The locals were so upset that the cemetery changed its mind and installed brand new equipment instead. Next, we have the story of Hannah Cranna from Connecticut. Hannah Hovey lived in Monroe, Connecticut. She was born in 1783 and married Captain Joseph Hovey. She would eventually be known as a witch. However, this did not come to pass until the mysterious death of her husband. Captain Hovey went for a walk one night on a familiar route. For some reason, he strayed from his path and walked straight off of a cliff. The townsfolk had no explanation for this, except that perhaps Hannah had bewitched him, making him confused. She soon became known by the name Hannah Cranna. Hannah never remarried and lived alone with a bunch of chickens. She used her reputation as a witch to threaten the townsfolk into giving her food and firewood. There were stories of her casting spells and curses on people. For example, Hannah asked one neighbor, well known for her delicious pies, if she could have one. The baker gave Hannah a pie, but Hannah wanted a bigger one. When the baker refused to trade pies, Hannah placed a curse on her, and her pies were never quite as good as they once were. Another time, an ox-drawn cart stopped in front of Hannah's house. The men riding in the cart started to mock and taunt Hannah. So she bewitched their cart. The oxen stopped moving and all of the wheels fell off the cart. Hannah had a rooster named Old Boreas. The townsfolk believed this was her familiar, which is an animal who helps a witch with their magic. On the day Old Boreas died, Hannah told a neighbor that she would die soon too. She said that she wanted her coffin to be carried by hand, not by a cart or anything similar, and that she must not be buried before sundown. She died the next day. Hannah's neighbors ignored her instructions. On the day Hannah was to be buried, snow covered the ground. Her neighbors placed her coffin on a sled and started towards the burial site. Hannah's coffin fell off the sled and slid back to her front door. They put the coffin back on the sled, but once they started moving, the coffin slid off again. They tried a few more times before finally giving up and carrying her coffin on their shoulders. When they finally got Hannah's coffin into her grave, the sun had just set. Exhausted, the townfolk returned home, only to find Hannah's house engulfed in flames, removing any remaining doubt in their minds that Hannah was indeed a witch. Today, Hannah Cranna's gravestone can be found in Gregory's Four Corners Burial Ground in Trumbull, Connecticut. They say her ghost sometimes makes an appearance, often causing drivers on the road to crash their cars. Next, from Delaware, the story of Mr. Chew. In Dover, Delaware in the 1700s, there lived a man named Samuel Chew. He was the Chief Justice, but he was often picked on for his name. People would come up to him and pretend to sneeze, "Achoo!" This made Mr. Chew very angry. It happened so often, and he became so enraged by this, that when he eventually died, his ghost stuck around to haunt Dover and torment everyone who ever made fun of his name. He would appear in his judge's robe and powdered wig to those who made fun of him when he was alive and terrorize them. The hauntings got so bad that people were too afraid to go out at night. Eventually, it was decided that the best way to stop Mr. Chu's ghost was to hold a decent funeral for him. They held a ceremony and buried an empty casket beneath the tree where Mr. Chu's ghost was most often spotted. The plan was a success, and Mr. Chu's ghost was calmed. However, one should not seek out Mr. Chu's grave and pretend to sneeze. It is said that his spirit still lingers and still hates people making fun of his name. Right, our next story is the 100 Steps Cemetery from Indiana. Near Brazil, Indiana, there is a cemetery known as the 100 Steps Cemetery, or Cloverland Cemetery. Here you will find a set of steps leading up a hill. If you go to the cemetery at midnight on a moonless night, count each step as you climb up the hill. When you reach the top, the ghost of the cemetery's first undertaker will appear. The ghost will then, without a word, show you a vision of how you are going to die. After this vision, you must, without a word to the undertaker, turn around and go back down the steps, counting each one again. When you reach the bottom, compare the numbers. If you counted the same number of steps going up as you did going down, the vision of your death is fake. If you counted a different number of steps, the vision of your death is true. You may think you can be sneaky and climb the hill by going around the steps or by not counting the steps at all. Neither of these tricks work. If you try, you will be shoved to the ground by an invisible force that feels like a hand. You will then find that a large red handprint has appeared on your back, which will linger for days. From Ohio, the Werewolf of Defiance. During the summer of 1972, in the early morning hours before the sun was even up, a railroad worker was approached by a shadowy figure. The mysterious figure attacked the worker with a piece of lumber, striking him in the arm, and then quickly disappeared into the brush. Later on, another railroad worker spotted the same figure. Then the police received a report of a creature who ran in front of their car and quickly dashed off. More reports came in, all giving a similar description. The creature was very hairy, even having hairy feet. It had an animal head and fangs, and was very tall, between 7 and 8 feet. It ran side to side like an animal and appeared twice under a full moon. And the creature would always run away before it could be approached and spoken to. The police admitted that it could have just been a prank and been the work of someone in a mask and costume, but no one really knows for sure. Right, our final story comes from Pennsylvania, the bus to nowhere. In Philadelphia, an unusual bus can sometimes be spotted driving around the city. It is known as the bus to nowhere, or the wandering bus. Its display lists no destination and no route number, although locals do call it Route 0. It does not show up on any bus schedule or map. Nothing is known about the mysterious driver. It does not have any stops. You cannot just wait in a specific spot for it to show up. The bus will only appear when you are completely hopeless, at your absolute lowest point, and just want to get away from everything. The bus will then appear to you, but it will not stop or slow down. You must chase after the bus, and seeing how desperate you are to get away, the bus will finally slow down and allow you to board. There will be other passengers on the bus, other people filled with despair. The bus has no final destination. It just keeps driving along, occasionally slowing down to let a new passenger on board. Once you are on the bus, you will just ride around forever and ever, unless you choose to disembark. If you do decide that you are ready to leave the bus, which could be after days, months, or even years, you must pull on the cord. The bus will stop and let you off. You will not end up where you boarded the bus, but instead find yourself exactly where you need to be. All right, thank you for joining us for this Myth of the Month. We will see you next time with another myth from around the world.